How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. I hope your first weekend with the PS5 Pro was great. I answered some of your messages I saw on my PSN with a bunch of people sending pictures of it, so it looks like it's selling pretty damn good. The first games I tested out were, of course, Space Marine 2. This game finally runs at or close to 60 frames per second in performance mode, and it looks a lot better, like so much cleaner. There were a couple of the operations where it would drop into the high 50s, but I'll take it because before it was running at like 40 FPS a lot of the time. And I also played Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred. That was already 60 FPS on PS5. I could not see the difference on PS5 Pro, but the game works. Anyway, today's video, I've got 3 topics to cover. The first one is that if you live in Australia, you better listen up because the PSN might be banned. Second on the list, we're talking about Sony's future plans, and one of them includes bringing a rewind button to your controller. And third, it's your last chance to grab this free PS5 accessory, and I'll tell you why you definitely should. All right, let's jump into this first news story here, which is just a continuation of the problems for the PlayStation Network. But this time, it's not exactly Sony's fault. So I guess over in Australia, they're like doing legislation, or, you know, they're about to pass this new law, which could greatly affect the PSN to the point where a big population of PlayStation 5 gamers will not be able to access the PlayStation Network. So this whole thing centers around blocking access to social media for teens. So like anyone 16 or under in Australia, they're trying to ban people in that age range from using social media websites because bad stuff can happen online, like you put too much info out there, someone shows up at your house, or anything crazy like that. So they're just saying, well, we're going to ban 16-year-olds and under from using online features. But because of the weirdly stringent rules that they have to classify a website as a social media website that will ban people in that age group, the PSN is definitely going to be affected as well. The reason the PlayStation Network is being included in this Online Safety Act is because you can talk to people on it. So, you know, when you're in Call of Duty and you're in a lobby, you can hear everyone talking. Because that is the case, it is being lumped in with all these other social media websites like X and Facebook and all the other ones like Instagram and TikTok as well. Now, weirdly enough, I read into it a little bit. It doesn't seem like they're going to do anything if people try and circumvent this. So like it's a symbolic law, which seems really weird to put in all the time and effort to make a law like this in the first place. It seems like the only reason they're doing it is to appease parents of kids who are being fear-mongered into thinking their kids are being abused online or whatever, or their kids can't handle the Modern Warfare 2 lobbies that I grew up with, and they're taking it to the logical extreme of that, which is banning their kids from using it in the first place. Shocker, there's a bunch of reasons why I think this is stupid and it's going to not have the intended effect at all. First of all, it's the Streisand effect. You know, I'm not going to give you an explainer on that, but if you go through the trouble of banning something, that is the best marketing possible to get people to want to use it. I just talked about this on Real Ones in a future video that's coming out in I think 2 weeks, where, you know, they banned Evil Dead in the UK because, you know, like there was this whole video nasties law where they said, oh, we can't let people watch these gory horror movies. So Evil Dead had to have 49 seconds cut out of it to be released in theaters. But then they found out that if you released a movie on VHS, that, you know, you could release it uncut, and it was a loophole in the law. So they just banned it outright until 2001 when it was finally released in its uncut form. But people figured out a way to see it because, you know, if you ban something, it makes people want to see it or play it. It's just the same thing as like a lot of games get banned in Australia for having blood, right? Like they have to make their blood green or whatever to actually get M-rated games to be able to be sold there. But because you can find this stuff online, the American or European versions still make their way over there in the first place. And the second reason is it's just a waste of time and money. There are so many bigger problems in the world that need to be solved other than, you know, teenagers going on the PlayStation Network and getting swore at by people playing Call of Duty. Like their parents bought them the game in the first place because the games already have rating systems involved. So if you're under 17, you can't buy M-rated games anyway. So if the kids get their hands on these games, it really is because the parents probably bought it for them. So if the parent is choosing to allow their kid to play a game like Call of Duty or whatever that has the PlayStation Network enabled, then it should be fine. The government shouldn't be able to come in and tell the parent, no, you can't make choices for what your kid is allowed to play. That's just ridiculous. And the third big reason is that they're not going to take this to its logical conclusion. They're going to make the law and say 16-year-olds can't use the PlayStation Network, but, you know, you could make an 18-year-old PlayStation Network account and you'd be fine. You'd be able to log in and play Call of Duty to your heart's content. And they also say they're not going to do anything to people who go through the trouble of circumventing this. So if by some chance you accidentally make an underage PlayStation Network account, like you put your actual birthday in, you could just use a VPN to get around it and they're not going to do anything about it. So if they're not going to punish it or do anything about it, why go through all the time, energy, and spend all the money required to actually put this law through? It seems like a really weird situation, and it seems like a fool's errand because, as the great people over at Push Square put it, it's appeasing parents now in the older generation to eventually lose the election when it comes up in a few years, and potentially a lot of these people that you're kind of punishing for no reason are going to be able to vote. So it's like putting an unnecessary timer, or it's like an unforced error, right? Like you're putting a timer on your status of power. Like these kids are going to be pissed and then they're going to be old enough to vote, and the first thing they're going to do is hold a grudge and vote you out, and rightfully so. Social media sites, they're constantly in the crossfire. Even here in America, there's constant arguments over how much control people should have over what they say on social media sites. You know, you give people complete free speech here in America. The UK has obscenity laws like I talked about with Evil Dead. So the EU and the UK are talking about banning X, and then you get the governments involved where they say if you ban X, we're going to do bad things. I don't want to talk about politics on the channel, but like there's crazy stuff going on with social media right now, and it seems like it's just going to get worse. But man, being in 2024 after growing up in the 90s when there was all that legislation and all that lobbying against M-rated games and R-rated movies and gore in movies and everything like that, I thought we were past that. But we're really at that point where an entire country, Australia, is talking about banning an entire age group from accessing the PlayStation Network. It seems totally crazy, but every article I read about this said there's a very real threat. It's not like they're going to pass this law and maybe the PlayStation Network will be affected. It has been confirmed that the PlayStation Network will be affected. So I'm curious if this will also extend to Nintendo, if it'll also extend to Microsoft, or, you know, if they're only talking about the PlayStation in these articles because the PlayStation Network is the one that drives clicks versus the Xbox Live Network or the Nintendo Switch Online Network. But still, things are getting crazy. If you are in Australia, I guess invest in a VPN or make sure your PlayStation Network account is not set up as underage. Unfortunately, if it is underage, you're going to have to make a whole new PlayStation account. Back in the PS3 days, that didn't really matter because all that was at risk was your saves. But now, with the vast majority of people, like 75% or more, buying their games all digital, there is a kind of monetary threat to just making a new PlayStation Network account. I guess you could make a new account and leave the old one logged in and play with the older account, but then you'd run into licensing issues or something like that. But this is yet another reason you should be buying all of your games physically, because if you did that and you made an overage account, you'd lose your save, obviously, but that's a lot less of a penalty to pay than having to rebuy the game entirely. Anyway, that brings us to the second news story here, which is my favorite thing to talk about, which is Sony patenting stuff. They're always working on new things, and unlike that hardware encoding stuff we talked about with the PlayStation 6 in the last video, I want to say this is a cool feature that could come to the current DualSense if they ever release the DualSense V2 that was teased through Best Buy in January of this year. So this is one that they're going way back to the era of the VHS with. What they want to add to future PlayStation controllers like the DualSense V2 or maybe the DualSense 2 for the PlayStation 6 is a full-on rewind button. And this immediately got me excited because playing all these PlayStation classics or playing Castlevania Symphony of the Night on my Steam Deck, the coolest thing about it is being able to have save states where, you know, older games, you'd have really bad checkpoint systems. If you die in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, you're sent back to the main menu. You got to watch all the intro videos again. You got to load your save. So dying adds a lot of time to your playthrough. And the emulator I use, DuckStation, has a fast forward feature. So if I die and I don't have a save state that's really close to where I died, I just turn on that fast forward feature. It gets me right back to where my save is and everything works out great. So this rewind button though is not going to necessarily be like that, where if you die in a game, you'll be able to rewind and just pick up from there instead of waiting for the checkpoint to load. What it is a way to kind of circumvent people's short attention spans. I mean, I'm guilty of this, right? Like I'm playing the Vessel of Hatred expansion for Diablo 4, and in my opinion, even though the cutscenes are really good and well made, the story is terrible. Like it's just a bunch of jargon that doesn't really mean anything. It's like gussying up really basic lore with like all these weird deep cut words and everything. It's just like when I see a cutscene in Diablo 4, I just pull my phone out and scroll through Twitter, right? Like I take it as a break to look at my phone, and that's what they're trying to circumvent with this rewind button. So what it would do is if you're playing God of War Ragnarok 2 or something and you miss a cutscene because you're on your phone, you could then hit the rewind button and it'll have a few frames saved in memory that you'll then be able to scroll back and watch. Now you can kind of do this already with with the DualSense if you leave recording on like I do. I gotta be honest, in games like Jedi Survivor, I have done this a couple of times where a cutscene's playing, I glance at my phone because I see a text and I miss some story info. So what I do is I stop the recording, I open it up in the media gallery, and I go back and watch what just recorded. But having it built into the operating system to make it fast, snappy, and fluid, where you can just scroll back a few frames, watch what you missed in case it was critical story info, I think this could be pretty cool. But as we've seen with things like the DualSense Edge, when you add in more stuff that makes the controller more premium, like a potential rewind button, it gets rid of real estate in the controller, and what we get is a controller with a smaller battery bay. And when you have a controller with more features and a smaller battery bay, you get overall worse battery life. Like I was playing Diablo over the weekend on my PS5 Pro. I played Diablo 4 for about 2 hours, I would say. I took a break from writing a Real Ones video. I booted up the game. I jumped right in. I went to turn off the console, and when I got to the home menu, I saw that my battery was already empty on this controller. There is no reality in which that should last only 2 hours. That's just ridiculous. And on top of that, Diablo does not have any of the haptic feedback features or the adaptive triggers as far as I can tell, because my hot buttons are all set to the triggers. I'm spamming them constantly. I would feel it if there were adaptive triggers. So I hope if this rewind feature does go through, they also invest just as heavily in making sure that whatever controllers we get coming down the pike also have much bigger batteries. I want to go back to the days of the PS3 when they would last like months at a time because they didn't even have Rumble. Anyway, that brings us to the third news story of today's video, which is that you should grab this PlayStation 5 accessory, which is completely free because it goes away forever very soon, and there's a big reason why you should grab it. So the accessory I'm talking about is the adapter for the PSVR 1. If you didn't know, PSVR 1 and PSVR 1 games are not compatible with the PlayStation 5. That headset uses the camera to track the headset and the controllers, so you need a PlayStation 4 camera to be able to use it. You also need an adapter for it to work with your PlayStation 5 because it has this weird midpoint box that does all the extra processing required for the PSVR 1 headset. So this adapter thankfully is free from Sony, and it's going away very soon. Now, whether you have a PSVR 1 or not, you should definitely grab this accessory for one big reason, and that is the resale market. I talked about this in my PS5 Pro videos last week, but there's a good reason to keep stuff around, like your launch PS5, or if you got a PS5 Slim last year, or this PSVR 1 accessory. The longer you keep it in your possession in working order and keep it in good condition, the more the value is going to go up over time. Because, you know, electronic items, they break, they have a shelf life, people treat them crappy, they fall apart. Like we've seen the PS4s that people are still using where they have to hit them with a hammer to get the disk drive to work. And the longer you keep your stuff in working order, the longer the value is going to go up, because as time goes on, people are going to get nostalgic. So even though there's a small group of people out there who bought the PSVR 1 in the first place, as time goes on, they are going to be nostalgic for PSVR 1 games, and PSVR 1 games don't work with the PSVR 2, and a lot of them aren't ported up to the PSVR 2. So when they hit that point, they're going to go online and they're going to look for this free accessory, and they're going to realize that they can no longer grab it for free. So at that point, you can go over to Amazon and buy a third-party version of it, which is going to cost them money, or, you know, they're going to have that thought in the back of their head that they want the official Sony accessory that was free at some point, and at that point, you're going to throw yours up on eBay and you're going to make money off of it. Now, it could be $10, $20, maybe even $5, but wouldn't you want to have one just around in a little shelf somewhere that you could pull out if there is a situation where these things start selling for like 60, 70, or 80, maybe even $100? At the end of the day, it's free. All you have to do is go to the Sony support website and fill out a form, and they'll send you one of these in the mail. I got to be real, I never had a PSVR 1, but as soon as these things became available, I just filled out the form to get an adapter for free, because what if I did come into possession of a PSVR 1 down the line, or, you know, what I just talked about, if these things become valuable, I want to have one on hand so I can just throw it up on eBay and make a quick 50, 60, 70, maybe even $100. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.